We've already seen the greatest disc golfer of all time on the FPO side. Time to switch over and find out who the greatest FPO disc golfers are. Collecting data and stats on some of the best players that disc golf has ever seen, I've put together my top 10 female professional players. Spanning from the 1980s to the 2020s, these are the best the sport has to offer. Now, just like for the FPO, we have to consider majors as such a big factor when looking at who is the greatest ever. Alongside majors, we have Elite Series wins, which include National Tour and Disc Golf Pro Tour wins, as well as big A-tier events. We are not considering any wins in Masters Division either, just focusing primarily on the Open Division to compare these individuals. The top 10 greatest FPO disc golfers of all time, here we go. Before we get into the video, I have a very exciting announcement. I've been working with the crew at Whale Sacs to come out with an RM Disc Golf Whale Sac. A Whale Sac is a tie-on whale-shaped grip bag that is designed to dry your wet and sweaty hands. I wanted to partner with a brand that I actually use, and I've carried a whale for the last 2 years. Whale Sacs allowed me to have my input when it comes to the design, and I'm pretty proud of what we've come up with. If you want to support the channel and support a great brand like Whale Sacs, make sure to go check them out. Link is in the description below. With any top 10, we have to first check out those who just barely missed the list. Here's my honorable mention. The first ever disc golf champion, Marie Jackson, won back-to-back world titles in 1982 and 83. Without the first ever champions in our sport, we wouldn't have a base to build off of. Jackson was and will always be the first world champion in disc golf. Angela Chigfree is a 2-time US Women's Disc Golf Championship alongside a couple National Tour wins. One of the best disc golfers in the mid-2000s, definitely needed an honorable mention shout-out. Finally, the only player I really felt could have been in the top 10 but was just barely edged out. Sarah Cunningham, 2-time major champion and a 6-time National Tour winner. She's one of the few players to have ever won a world title and a US Women's title back-to-back. She had an incredible peak in 2010 but just didn't have enough wins in the later part of her career. Birgitta Lagerholm is one of the only 2 Europeans on this list. With that being said, the large part of her success came from European disc golf. 4-time European Open winner, all of them not when they were majors. She does have 2 major championships though. In 2004, she was able to take down the world title. 6 years later, in 2010, she would win the Scandinavian Open. Before the next person on this list shows up, Lagerholm was always considered the best European FPO player. She was a top-ranked European player for an entire decade. Alongside that, she was able to take down 2 majors, facing off against multiple players who were higher ranked than her. Kristin Tattar only just now popping off on the disc golf scene. She had an insane season last year. But for her career, she doesn't just have what she did last year. She's a 2-time major champion. In 2019, she won the US Women's Championship. Then this past year, she dominated and won the world title. 8 total wins on the Disc Golf Pro Tour. Tattar has always been a dominant force in Europe. She had one of the best seasons we've ever seen in disc golf last year, but that just seems to be the tip of the iceberg for her. She has the most potential to go up further on this list, but for right now, the 9th spot is still really impressive from a player with such a short career so far. Close call for right now on who the best European player in history is, but Tattar for me is the best we've ever seen. The closer we get to number 1, we really start to see more dominance in the disc golf scene. Carrie Berlager was one of the best disc golfers in the 2000s. She is in rare class with her 4 major titles. Even though she's an American, most of her wins for majors came in Europe. 2-time winner of the European Open, also a Japan Open winner, and then finally one of the 3 women to have won the Players' Cup. She was a force to be reckoned with on the National Tour with 6 career wins. She battled against pretty much everyone higher on this list, maybe overshadowed a bit from the dominance from other players, but she certainly has her fair share of big wins. Longevity in the sport is something that has to be of note. How long have you played for at the top level? Sarah Holcomb is one of those players who's played at the top for a really long time. She's been along for the ride in the 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. Constantly a top 10 player in standings, she has wins on the National Tour, Disc Golf Pro Tour, and major titles. The sidearm specialist won Worlds in 2012, then won 2 US Women's titles in 2013 and 2016. She has racked up over $200,000 in earnings over her career, as well as performed against some of the best the sport has to offer. All of this while being one of the very few sidearm specialists. She's never been considered the number 1 player of her time, but she has to be included in the top 10. As we will see from the rest of the players in this top 10, there's a decent gap between them and Holcomb. Still, Holcomb's longevity in being a top player is ranked among the best. Still grinding, still in the hunt, she could certainly grab some more wins to boost her spot. But for right now, 7th place on the greatest of all time list is where I have her. One of the first greats in the sport of disc golf, Elaine King's dominance showed that the sport could be taken over by one athlete. In the 1990s, she would win 5 of the 10 world championships. 4 of those were in a row. At that time, Worlds was the only major championship, so when one player dominated like that, it was hard not to notice. She wouldn't stop with world titles, she would also capture 2 US women's titles in the 2000s. Just capturing 2 national tour wins, her dominance would come to an end as other players rose up. But King was the first great champion in the FPO division. As Ken Climo dominated the men's side of disc golf, King was his counterpart. As always, the argument is what kind of damage could King have done if she had more chances at majors. She got her fair share of shots at titles, but nothing compared to a lot of these other players in their prime. For how it sits now, King is still one of the greats, and one of the most winning disc golfers in the FPO division. After King came Korver, literally. The next champion to take over would be Juliana Korver. Before other majors started to pop up, Korver pretty much won Worlds whenever it was held, winning 4 major titles in a row. She would lose her chance at going for 5, but it wouldn't really matter because she would return the following year to win it again. 6 major titles in total, also winning 16 national tour titles. From May of 1998 to February of 2002, Korver played in 119 events. She won 114 of them. Now again, not all of them were A-tier wins, but still the dominance was there. After leaving the pro scene for over a decade, Korver would return in 2021. At the age of 50, she was able to secure multiple top 10s out on tour. Not really challenging for titles, but still an impressive feat. Apart from King, she was the next to dominate the disc golf scene, able to win on the national tour, not just majors. The sport grows, and it's because we have players to watch, players strive to be as good as. Korver showed dominance at the early stages of the sport, setting it up for players to come. She won, just not quite enough. Easily a top 5 player of all time though, you can't deny that. One of the greatest to play the game, and possibly the first to be recognized with that kind of status. Des Reading is the greatest disc golfer in the history of the national tour. Dominating a tour is hard to do, and that's exactly what she did. In 2006 and 7, Reading won 15 of 16 national tour events that she played in. In 2022, the Disc Golf Pro Tour absorbed the national tour, so whatever the standings are, they'll stay like that. Reading has 30 career national tour wins. She's also shined in major events as well, winning 7 major titles, 3 of them world titles. She played against some of the best the game had to offer, including the back end of King's career and Korver's. In 2003, 4, and 5, she won the US Women's title. In the history of the US Women's Championship, she is the only one to have defended her title 3 years in a row. Others have won as many as she has, just not in 3 consecutive years. It was a challenge not to put her higher up, but just like for the MPO side of things, my argument remains the same. It's harder to win now than it was back then. With the growth of the game, that's just how it is. As more money comes into the sport later in the years, the more worthwhile it is for players to fight for titles. If Reading had won 30 national tour titles in the 2010s, then she'd be right up there in the top 3. As I've already explained my argument for why it's harder to win in more recent years, I have to put Katrina Allen in 3rd place for the greatest of all time. Everything she has accomplished has come in the last 10 years. Compared to most on this list, it's been a lot more of a challenge for her to win. She may have less national tour titles, 20 in total actually, but she's also won on the Disc Golf Pro Tour. Allen has 7 major titles as well, 2 world championships, 4 times she has won major championships over in Europe. Her battles have come later in the history of the sport, against newcomers who have insane talent and also against a player who is higher up on this list. Allen has proven herself to be an amazing major winner, capable of adapting and improving when it comes to her skills. All of this has happened with the growth of the sport, huge events and titles when the money has come into the sport. Between King, Korver, Reading, and Allen, all are in the category of being great, but just not great enough. The top 2 on the list for the all-time greats are in another tier. These last 4 players have proved themselves to be considered for sure in the top 6, but the 2 remaining players have solidified themselves at the top. Allen for me though stands firmly in the 3rd spot for the greats. For the longest time, Valerie Jenkins held the record for most disc golf major titles. The rest of the players we've talked about top out at 7 major titles. Jenkins, on the other hand, has an incredible 16. Spanning from 2006 to 2016, Jenkins won 16 titles. Pretty much every major title, she won it. Worlds, US Women's, European Opens, European Majors, Australia, and Japan, she's won it all. Her 2 best streaks are 3 world titles in a row and 4 Japan Opens in a row. As Reading won her 30 national tour titles, Jenkins falls just barely short with 29. Jenkins bridged the gap of FPO disc golf, having to beat Reading and King early in her career, defending off Holcomb, Allen, and of course the number 1 in the later half of her career. For all-time records, it just seems like she's in 2nd for both. For national tour wins, she's 1 shy. Currently, the same goes for major titles. For every player in this top 10, Jenkins played against and beat most of them. As close as it is for comparing the championships of Allen, Korver, and Reading, it was the same amount of closeness between Jenkins being number 1. Some of you might have her in the spot, but for me, she remains in 2nd place. Finally, after seeing all of the greats the sport has to offer, it's time to reveal the #1 greatest player of all time. Paige Pierce is the greatest FPO disc golfer. Where others have shined, she's shined brighter. I've already hinted at it, but Pierce currently has the most disc golf majors of all time with 17. 31 Elite Series wins, that includes both National Tour and Disc Golf Pro Tour wins. She's the most winning Disc Golf Pro Tour player, alongside her accolades of being the winningest major champion ever. Now the numbers might be close between her and Jenkins, but for the same argument that Allen is number 3 on the all-time list, so is Pierce number 1. She's dominated not in the 90s or the 2000s. No, she's played the best disc golf when the sport has grown as much as it has. In the second half of the 2010s and the beginning of the 2020s, there's no other disc golfer like Pierce. What's funny is that she had a slow season last year. Winning 2 major titles and 2 Pro Tour events is a slow season. She had some bad tournaments, but still, she's incredibly dominant. National Tour, Pro Tour, majors, if she played in it, she's won it. She battled with Jenkins again in the later part of her career, but still she was able to beat her. The battle between her and Allen is one of the greatest rivalries in disc golf. If it wasn't for Allen to push her, imagine all of the events Pierce could have won. But without defeating Allen, the majority of the time we wouldn't be able to really compare Pierce to some of the greats. Her success in the later part of the history of disc golf can't be ignored. She's won more majors than Jenkins and in more recent years. Like I said before, Jenkins and Pierce have set themselves apart from the rest of the top 10, but in my eyes, Pierce is the top spot. All the way from the 1980s to the 2020s, these are my top 10 greatest disc golfers of all time, FPO edition. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Who is in your top 10? What would you change about my list? Do you guys have Jenkins number 1 on the greatest of all time, or do you agree with me on Paige Pierce? The question to ask yourself is, who's your GOAT? Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to check out the channel. Plenty of other videos on there just like this. If you want to support the channel and a great brand like Whale Sacs, make sure to check out the link in the description. Alright, we'll see you guys next time. Cheers.